Hello everyone, this is Micah History, and welcome to part 10 of What If Rome Never Fell. Now, if you want to know what was happening previously, don't forget to watch the previous videos. Alright, have you done so? Okay. So the year is 1899. It is the dawn of a new century, the 20th century. But this will be a century like no other. Already throughout the late 19th century, Rome had changed irreversibly. The age of imperialism had begun in the second half of that century, and Rome had been relentlessly expanding across Europe, in Southeast Asia, and across the Pacific. But they had also gone to war with the United States, and this would change their country forever. See, the Roman defeat to the United States sparked a wave of independence movements across the Americas. The Chiquisaca and the La Paz revolutions sparked the Bolivian War of Independence and began the Roman-American Wars of Independence. Soon afterwards, the Peruvian War of Independence began as well. In 1900, in the Plate River, the May Revolution happens, resulting in the Argentine War of Independence and its invasion of Upper Peru and Paraguay. Colombia declared its independence and formed the First Republic of New Granada. The Chilean and Venezuelan Wars of Independence also began. Meanwhile, a priest in New Spain began the Mexican War of Independence. In 1901, Venezuela declared independence. The Upper Peru and Paraguay campaigns failed as they stayed Roman. However, Paraguay used the opportunity to also declare independence. An independence movement began in El Salvador but was quickly crushed. Meanwhile, the first rebellion in Mexico was crushed, but another one began under a new priest. In 1902, Venezuela fell into a civil war and was reconquered by Rome, but Argentina began its second Upper Peru campaign and launched its second Banda Oriental campaign to conquer Uruguay. In 1903, Venezuela became independent once again, while Argentina successfully won the second Upper Peru campaign. Now, back to the rest of the world. In 1904, northern Cambodia had been ceded by Siam to Rome, while the colony of Roman West Africa had been created. But back to the Americas, the second Banda Oriental campaign ended in an Argentine conquest of Uruguay. But Rome had not given up, and after its expansion in Africa, it believed that it could not afford to lose any more colonies. And so it began its reconquest of the colonies, successfully taking back Venezuela and Chile. The following year, the reconquest of New Granada began, while Argentina failed in its third Upper Peru campaign, resulting in Rome taking over Bolivia. However, a third rebellion broke out in Mexico. In 1906, the Huaday War broke out, as Rome intervened in the Huaday succession crisis. Meanwhile, Argentina declared independence, but Rome had reconquered New Granada. In 1907, the Roman conquest of Morocco began after the assassination of a Roman doctor in Marrakesh. But Rome could hardly afford to spend too much attention to Morocco because Chile had begun a rebellion against Roman rule, while the Third Republic of Venezuela was declared, and a stalemate with Rome had ensued. In 1908, Chile declared independence, and the War of Argentine Independence finally ended, with Argentina lost for good. In 1909, the Second Millennium Campaign happened in Morocco, in which Rome expanded more in the Rif. Meanwhile, Venezuela invaded Colombia, and together they created the state of Gran Colombia. In 1910, things were hardly better. Rome was beginning to lose control over Peru, which declared independence the following year, while the Mexican War for Independence ended with the creation of a Mexican empire. Also, another Roman-Turkish war broke out over Tripolitania, which saw the first use ever of aerial bombardment. In 1912, Rome lost control over most of Peru. The Huaday War ended with the Roman conquest of Huaday, while Rome overran Morocco and turned it into a Roman vassal. Rome also concluded its war with the Ottomans, which ended in a Roman conquest of Tripolitania and the Dodecanese. Finally, in 1913, the Venezuelan War of Independence ended. Whew! Thank God there's going to be no more war. Oh, what's that? The heir to the Roman throne was assassinated by Gavrilo Princip? Shoot. And so, World War I breaks out. Rome and Germany go to war with Russia, who defends Serbia. Soon after, the Ottomans join in as well. Russia begins by invading eastern Prussia, but is quickly defeated. But back to the Americas, because in 1915, Bolivia declared independence, ending the Bolivian War of Independence, while the Roman German armies back in Europe pushed Russia into the Great Retreat as they conquered Poland, but they soon reach a stalemate and trenches are dug. Now in 1916, the Chilean and Peruvian Wars of Independence end, while Rome begins to be pushed back during the Brusilov offensive, which prompts Romania's entry into the war. Meanwhile, Germany declares the formation of a Polish vassal state. However, in 1917, there was one country that was definitely doing a lot worse than Rome, and that was Russia, which experiences a February Revolution, but it continues the war until the Russian Emperor and the Russian Provisional Government and Romania are all defeated, and eventually the October Revolution brings the communists to power in Russia. Finland uses the opportunity to declare independence. Now, in 1918, to finally end the war, the Germans launch Operation Faustschlag, and after nearly reaching Petrograd, the war ends with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Kars is ceded to the Ottomans. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania become German vassals, and Ukraine becomes a Roman vassal. Meanwhile, Britain, which, keep in mind, hadn't joined the war, becomes worried about German expansion in power. Now, up to this point, I think you guys have noticed that probably, for the most part, a lot of the timeline stays the same, pretty similar to our timeline, just that happens slightly different times. But what I'm going to say is starting here in 1918 and continue on for the next century, things will change a lot. And so if you've wanted to have, I guess, a more spicy timeline, this is where it really begins. All right, with a different World War I, we should say, the world would be a very, very different place, because it was a major event that defined the century since. Without this outcome, many things change, and the world remains more conservative. Feminism, for example, never really takes hold, especially not in Rome. Society stays much more conservative than it did, including in arts, politics, and religion. Fascism never emerges, and modern art remains a fringe movement. After the war, the United States replaces Rome as the dominant power in the Americas, while Germany increases its dominance in Europe. In 1922, the Soviet Union is formed, and the following year the Russian Civil War ends, with Eastern Belarus conquered by the Soviet Union, and Rome ending any more attempts to reconquer its colonies. The world is now a different place. We have a communist nation in Eastern Europe. We have Germany dominating continental Europe. We have Britain, which is less weakened but isolated, and Rome has now lost all its colonies in the Americas, now being replaced by the United States as the dominant power there. Now, for the most part, there is actually peace. Nothing really goes on until 1939, when Stalin invades Finland, which starts another war. But this time, though, it does not go in his favor. The Romans and the Germans ally, and in 1940, Moscow is taken, and a large part of Russia is taken as revenge. In 1941, a stalemate emerges, and the Soviet Union makes peace. Then in 1949, everything changes, as Germany tests the first ever nuclear weapon, and this changes warfare forever. Now, Rome quickly takes note of this, and realizes that in order to stay as a major power, it too must have nuclear weapons. And so in 1952, Rome tests its very first nuclear weapon. Also, between 1959 and 1960, all of Rome's vassals across Europe are integrated so that they become a proper part of the Roman Empire. In 1960, the United Kingdom tests its nuclear weapon. And, fearful of the new British power, the Romans decide to conquer Belgium, Romania, Greece, and Portugal, and finally reunite the Roman world. Now, Congo takes this opportunity to declare independence, and the Congo crisis emerges as Germany supports its independence while Rome tries to conquer it. Now, in 1964, the United States also tests its first nuclear weapon, but 1964 becomes a pivotal event in human history, as, for the very first time, humanity transcends Earth and Rome lands the very first man into space. In 1965, Mobutu Sese Seko, who was the German-backed leader, successfully drives the Romans out of Congo. In 1967, Rome conquers the weak Ottoman Empire in the final Roman-Turkish War, and this begins the Cold War between Rome and Germany over the dominance in Europe. In 1968, revolutions break out around the world. In Pakistan and Egypt, rebellions break out against the British, while university students protest in Japan and Mexico. Ethnic minorities in the United States protest and riot against racism, and students demand better conditions. Students occupy universities across Rome, and a German-backed protest movement and a Czech rebellion against the Romans is similarly encouraged. So in Poland, a Roman-backed Catholic protest against the German happens, while a student-led rebellion against the German government itself also emerges. Tensions emerge over Ukraine, as Kiev becomes a symbol of the Cold War, having a German and a Roman section, and the Romans try to forcefully take over the German section, but are pushed back. Now, in 1974, Russia tests its first nuclear weapon, and Germany lands a man on the moon. In 1976, Hungary rebels against Rome, but is crushed. Now in 1979, Margaret Thatcher, with Roman backing, overthrows the liberal pro-German government for a more conservative pro-Roman government. This massively escalates tensions as both countries vie for power over the United Kingdom. The Germans begin the Blitz, trying to conquer the island, but are pushed back, and this increases Thatcher's support. In 1981, after the Germans refuse to evacuate Kiev again, the Kiev Wall is set up to divide the city in two. In 1982, Germany encourages Argentina to invade the Falklands, which fails, but this causes the United Kingdom to threaten to nuke Argentina, and it is soon found that the Romans helped create those nukes for the British. Germany demands that Rome stops helping, which they refuse, and this nearly causes a nuclear war, but it ends with Argentina retreating and the Romans ending their nuclear help to the United Kingdom. But this causes a rift in between Rome and Britain, which remains conservative, but is no longer a Roman ally because it perceives that Rome has betrayed it. In 1991, as the Soviet Union collapses, Rome conquers the southern Caucasus. Rome's increased expansion and aggression worries Britain, which begins cooling relations with Germany, and the German emperor visits the United Kingdom for the first time in decades. And then this brings us to 2022, when terrorists in a plane drop a bomb in the Colosseum, which had remained intact until this day, causing a massive part of it to collapse. The terrorist is found. He is a Ukrainian separatist named Volodymyr Zelensky, and Rome finds out that he had received funding from Russia. Zelensky flies to Kiev, raising the banner of rebellion on February 24th, and Russia, under Putin, decides to invade to help, becoming a rising power in Europe once again. What will happen next? What is the outcome of the war? Nobody knows. Okay, guys, well, I want to say thank you so much for sticking it through. Thank you for all of you who have watched, liked, shared, and subscribed. For those of you who have gone through the entire playlist, I really respect that. I had an absolute blast writing this script about what if Rome never fell. And even though, of course, getting to 22 is so far in the future, there's no way to predict, I did think that this was not an entirely implausible scenario. So, I just want to thank all you guys for having supported me, and I am really excited to share the final episode where I kind of give a conclusion and a summary of how a world with the Roman Empire surviving would look at, because it truly does change a lot. So, once again, I hope you enjoyed the series. Tell me which one was your favorite episode, and I will see you next time for the final one. Have a great day.